This is the beginning of lesson 1 for project 3, and in project 3 we're going to continue following our sequence. In project 1 we started with the gathering of the data. We went and got our sample of votes and created the macro sheet. Then we went and identified those votes in the vote view data and created a micro level sheet. We also wrote an introduction with the question in project 2. We then filled in the literature review kind of theory section and then started on the research design. Project 3, we're going to go back and we're going to pick up this data with the intention of creating our dependent variable and inserting our independent variables in, and we'll also do some plots and maybe even a crosstab if we get to it. The process here begins with working with those floor votes again, and in particular what we need to do is we need to create a set of coding rules that are going to help us determine whether our aye or nay votes need to be inverted. So let me kind of go to these floor votes. I'll tell you how I started as far as the process went. You go to the floor votes and show more, and I just printed this list off. As you see, some of these are Senate votes in here, cloture and everything else, but with the House votes, they go from 19 all the way to 34, and they have a short description here. We're going to use this and a Thomas Library of Congress site to interpret what the votes ultimately say. But the first thing we need to do is we need to create some rules. And so what I did is I just simply print this off, and then I'd look at the descriptions and look for particular things associated with this bill, and kind of trying to create typologies. If you go through these, I came up with about 4. And I don't, depending on what your project is, you'll come up with 3 or 4 or how many. The first things that I was looking at was there's a lot of amendments that deal with the issue of soft money. And so this one is soft money, this is ban soft money, this one down here is soft money again, this one here is First Amendment, this is sort of communications and freedom of speech. So I would print these off and I would just write in the margins what the topic of the amendment was or the topic of the vote. And I ultimately came down to 4 of them, in addition to the coding rule for the final passage vote and any procedural amendments, and I'll show you what that looks like. You're going to use this same format. Obviously, this one has my law that I was doing as an example, the BICRA Act, Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, but you're going to kind of adjust and modify these rules, but kind of keep the same format for your particular law. So just simply copy and put this into a separate page in your document, and modify it for your own use. When I went through, I identified 4 different topics of amendments that were particularly appropriate, and I could kind of collapse the votes that I had into those categories. The first was regular contributions, and those are items or values that were regulated under the existing campaign finance laws, the FEC. And those were from individuals or donors going directly to the candidate. The other was the regulation of soft money contributions. Soft money is where individuals could, or businesses or whatever, could make large contributions, unlimited contributions to the parties. And what was happening is the parties were then using it for some other purpose that would ultimately help the candidate. And so there are 2 types of contributions, either regular contributions or soft money contributions. Another thing that came up in the amendments for the bill was things associated with candidate communications. There were things like First Amendment riders that they would put in there. There was also information about excluding certain types of communications from the regulations, such as Second Amendment stuff, civil rights, and things of that nature. And so that was an area where I could find. The fourth one was really this idea of public subsidies to campaigns. There was an amendment in there associated with public subsidies for local television and radio, and so it would allow candidates to pay a lower rate and for their advertising expenses. And then, of course, we're going to have something on everybody will have a final passage vote, and they'll have House procedures. If we look at this, the idea is to identify a key topic here, right? In my case, those are in italics, and I would suggest doing that. And then in your stances, use that kind of same position. So policy proposals that restrict or limit the amount of regular contributions associated with political candidates. And then over here, I would use one of those words as kind of my primary focus. So opposition would be something that would relax the current restriction or the proposed language in the bill. And so the idea is policy proposals that restrict regular contributions. And if opposition to the act, it would relax the restrictions. Support for the act would increase the current restriction or proposed language in the bill as it currently stands. Same thing for here. Here it would either restrict or limit candidate communications, current restriction or proposed, right? And then policy proposal down here, subsidies. So here the key word was subsidies, right? Reduces public subsidies or favors private funding, increases public subsidies or disfavors private funding, right? Then down here it's just simply opposes supports procedure, opposes procedures. And that's a very clean kind of set of coding rules. And the idea behind that is the coding rules increase the reliability or the validity of your ultimate end code. As we'll see, this is really complicated, so you need some kind of clear ideas of what these votes are about. And so I've got 4 coding rules associated with potential amendments. I've got 1 associated with final passage, and then 1 associated with House procedures. It just so happened that my particular set of votes didn't have any procedural votes, and so I end up having this one, but I don't use it. I included it in the table because many of you will have procedural votes, and so I gave you an example of what that should look like. Okay. With your coding rules in place, you'll be ready to go through and start the process of coding. And so we're going to return to this macro level database. I gave you the template, but the template has been updated with a series of things. But let's go back and remember what we did before. We had the Congress, we had the year, the date of the vote, the first initial roll call number, and the roll call number associated with the variable in the roll call, in the vote view roll call data, the type of vote, which was amendment, final passage, procedural, etc., the description of the vote, the short description of the vote, the number of ayes and nays, and to the right of that, you're going to add these several columns. We're going to add a column that says rule code, and that is going to correspond to the rule identifier and the outcome of the rule in your table of coding rules. The sponsor position, I'll show you what that is, but it's going to essentially tell you what the sponsor did with respect to the amendment. The strategy, and the strategy is going to be one of 3. It can be either a unfriendly amendment, a friendly amendment, or what is known as a poison pill amendment. And we're going to use your coding rule and the sponsor position to determine what kind of strategy is at play in the current vote. With that, we're going to determine what final support for the amendment was, whether a support, in this case, support would be opposition. If it is a 0 versus a 1, that means we need to invert the variable found in vote view. So that column just needs to insert yes for any of those I codes with 0. And then to cross-check it, we're going to later need a number of supporting positions. And so in this case, I know we need to invert. It's a poison pill amendment. It's going to have to be inverted. And so when I invert it, the number of nay votes are going to become positive support. And so my check value later is going to be 249. Just like this one is 377. This one didn't need to be inverted, and so it's 240. So let me kind of walk you through the process on a couple of these votes, and then we'll kind of understand how this process works.